In a few days from now, the Republic of Uganda shall make 60 years of age. The Youth Roundtable once again convenes to explore the conversation around our political, social, and economic transformation and developments as a country. We know that we have evaluated the pre-independence, but also the post-independence, just partly. But now that we are reaching the climax of this celebration, we think that it is much more important that now we explore all aspects of this conversation, from the social to the economic to the political. And colleagues, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished young people, ladies and gentlemen, who is now my honor and privilege to introduce to you, and in no particular order. The Right Honorable Speaker of Kawempe Division, Akampurira Harris, who is also a legal scholar at Makerere University. Harris, many thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
How do you feel being on the Youth Roundtable?
No, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's 1 year now since I was last here.
Yeah.
And it's a delight to be back. It's an incredible space that you guys provided young people to express their opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a better subject than to interrogate our history in lieu of our future.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, next to Harris is Joyce Adikini from the Forum for Democratic Change Youth Wing. Joyce, many thanks for joining us. And also a software engineer. Yes, before I forget.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure being here. It's my third time on the Youth Roundtable. And like Harris has said, I appreciate the topic that we're here to discuss. And I hope by the time we get out of here, the audience will be appreciating how far we've moved and what we need to do to get to get to a better place where we have to be or we ought to be.
Yeah, wow, I love that. Yes, the man in the middle and perhaps a first time on the Youth Roundtable is Arinda Osbert, former guild president of Mountains of the Moon University. And also is an NRM cadre. Many thanks for joining us, Ndugu.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And surely speaking, I'm too humbled to discuss the issues of national importances to my generation and the generation which is above us and the generations which are coming. Because it will be historical as a Pan-Africanist, as a patriot, to share my views for national salvation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next to Osbert and next to myself is Joanita Juliet, a student of Chambugo University. And this is, I think, the bit about the Youth Roundtable. It's about mentorship. That's why we bring Juliet, a student, and a senior comrade on the same table so that they can share ideas. So I think that is what the Youth Roundtable is trying to achieve. But many thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Uganda at 60, I think we've moved 6 decades now. And I'm really honored to be a part of this conversation. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Harris, let me just begin with you, and perhaps for obvious reasons. You're a law student, so I believe you understand our constitutional history very well, but also your experience and your how should I call it, your pedigree. I believe that you understand the history that we have gone through as a country, and I'll just give you that privilege to just take us through pre-independence as we moved towards 1962. Just for the benefit of our viewers who don't understand where we have come from as a country. Just help them understand that.
Thank you very much, moderator, Comrade Kidega Moses, for the privilege to provide a brief overview of our pre-independence history. Yeah, everyone will remember that Uganda has had a checkered political and constitutional history, one of exclusion of the citizens of Uganda. Right away from inception, at the colonial inception in Uganda, by the 1900 Uganda Agreement. And then after Uganda Agreement, remember we had a series of agreements with other kingdoms of Toro, of Ankole, Bunyoro. These were the organized ethnic groupings. The history of Bunyoro and Uganda is well known. So when the British set foot on this land, they wanted to capture first the more organized and sophisticated groupings. So ultimately, Uganda was a natural target. So by way of an agreement, colonial rule was introduced here. And what was the common feature of colonial rule was exclusion of the citizens. The governor of Uganda was the parliament, was executive, and in many ways was the judiciary, because the judicial officers were appointed by him. So power was concentrated in the hands of the governor. So he was Uganda and Uganda was him. Whatever he said, according to his moods and swings, that was it. And so Ugandans, basically their role was to, provide labor, provide taxes to make sure that the machinery of the colonial government can keep running. But most importantly was that many of Ugandans, the Baganda chief and many other who later joined, were the ones who helped strengthen or entrench the colonial rule. So this teaches us something about subjugation, the systems used for subjugation. So our own people, fellow black men, were the ones who were used to, unleash brutality, because the colonialism was essentially military rule. It was military rule, although it was disguised in many ways. The white man was more intellectually organized than many of the dictatorships we see, so they could somehow disguise their rule, and they could somehow disguise that there is service delivery, and in some cases these things would be done. But what is essential is that the voices of the people, because what we understand as government is that the people are the sovereign in as far as the governance affairs of the country are concerned. But that has never happened. And that was the main feature of colonialism. So, and then you have up to about 1942, when you have the first members of Legico. Legico was the Legislative Assembly, and the three of them, among them was Kawadia. And I remember his remarkable speech on the floor of Parliament that the main challenges of this country are three. He talked about three main challenges that the Parliament has to grapple with. Number one was disease, number two was ignorance, and number three was poverty. The question therefore, to what extent today can we say that government in Uganda, Parliament alike, because when we talk about government, essentially we're talking about Parliament, talking about the executive, we're talking about the judiciary. These are the three arms of government. So if we reflect back, 1942, this is a time at which Kawadia mentioned these words as one of the first members of Legico, that our duty is to make sure that we fight the three evils that plague our society: disease, ignorance, and poverty.
All right, fair enough. Thank you for that very good background. Joyce, let me just come to you. You've heard the way Harris has put it, very critically clear. And he emphasizes the aspect of exclusion. And he's very right, because in 1938, there was an ordinance that barred Africans from trading from the city center, and so many other, discriminatory laws. But what I want to draw your attention to is that Kwame Nkrumah, towards towards the independence of Ghana, convened African leaders who later became leaders of their respective African states, the likes of Hastings Kamuzu Banda, who became Malawi's independence leader, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta. And he said that seek first the political kingdom and anything else shall fall in place. So as we clamored for independence, do you think that Ugandans focus too much on seeking the political kingdom and forgot to address issues like disease, issues like poverty, issues like ignorance that Harris is trying to talk about? Because post-independence, it was one group getting rid of another group. Obote fighting this, then you had me, So we focused so much on the political agitations and forgot to address the three issues that Honorable Kawalia mentioned. Is that true?
Yes, definitely. To a large extent, it has been, because when you look at the first regimes that came immediately after independence, the Bote's era and then Amin's era, you realize that they tried to bring out the spirit of Pan-Africanism and focus in service delivery. However, there was always another team outside fighting for power. So the regimes had to balance between service delivery and retaining power. And the moment it took that direction, we started experiencing coups and people going to the bush to fight. And then when we had that moment for like, I think 20 years, between 1962 to around 1986, when the NRM took over, the NRA took over. By then, NRM wasn't yet there. So from that time, the focus in the beginning was in trying to transform the mess that we had experienced in the 20 years. And everyone in this country will appreciate that in the beginning of the NRA regime, there was some little bit of things trying to shape with institutions. The country was trying to establish institutions, have a clear constitution that serves the majority, have an inclusive government, and then organize a free and fair election. But then when we reached the year 2000, somehow there was a switchboard, and the people in power changed their interest from service delivery, attending to education, health, and all those things, to retaining power. That is when we started. The same constitution that had just been written 5 years ago was now in the road to amendment. Because the 1995 constitution had not even taken 10 years when an amendment removed the term limits in 2004 was tabled. Okay, so it is from that time on that we started now making a journey back to where we came from. So the interest completely shifted from addressing issues of ignorance, education, and health to retaining power. All these sectors, speaking today, are actually the worst performing. Our education system has become worse than it used to be. I went to a UPE school, and I studied there for 7 years, primary 1 to primary 7. But if I go back to that same UPE school now, it is not somewhere I would want to be. The time we were there, yes, it was not the best, but now it is worse. It is more or less collapsed. Children just go there to pass time and then get married after P7 or in P6. It is very rare to find any of them even make it to senior 4. So it is a trend in all over the country. Most school buildings have even collapsed. They no longer have infrastructure, and the hospitals can no longer contain the level of treatment that is required. So you find that the only national referral hospital we have becomes overwhelmed. We still have cancer patients coming to sleep in the corridors because regional hospitals cannot attend to the illnesses that they have. So the 3 sectors indeed are the worst, and poverty has become a slogan. Every region is poor, and it doesn't even make any sense anymore when you try to evaluate which one is the poorest and which one is the richest, because it is like saying all students have failed, but the best has 10%. So it doesn't matter, even if you have 10%, you've still failed anyway. Okay. So that is how our poverty level is right now as a country.
So you agree that we focused much on the politics and forgot the other issues?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Let's hear from Osbert. Osbert, when you look at our constitution, I think Article 70 provides for the political system that we shall use as a country. The movement system, the multi-party system, they're all described. So what I understand is that when we are in the multi-party political system, the movement system is in abeyance, just waiting to be rejuvenated, right? And there have been arguments that the NRM really didn't appreciate multi-party dispensation, and that even from inception, you were a movement sort of thinking people, that you wanted Ugandans to be under the movement system, and perhaps you had legitimate reasons, because the other political parties had been organized around tribal sentiments or religious sentiments, and you said, no, let's have a movement system where you get to parliament or any position on merit. But it looks like with the evolving democracy, multi-party politics seems to be the way to go. Has the NRM, as a young person in the NRM, do you think that Uganda is moving towards embracing multi-party dispensation, and with the merits and demerits that it comes with?
Yeah, thank you so much, moderator. Before I talk about that issue, I need to first...
Of course, why I ask is because the topic is very broad. So we shall do back and forth, yeah? Go to the history, then come back and forth so that we can tap as many areas as possible.
Yeah, what I can assure you is when NRA took over powers, by then it was not a political movement. It was
a guerrilla,
very clear, a guerrilla movement, which was ready to make sure there is a national salvation of country Uganda. When they took over in 1986, there was no need for saying, me, I'm the boss, a chief justice, chief of army forces must be from my family. It was a national movement. Later on, they changed to national resistance movement. And they changed even a guerrilla movement to UPDF, which is very clear. As NRM, which I know, they have given each and everybody a right, a freedom to do whatever he or she wants. Whatever we do, we are under the governance of the Constitution of Uganda 1995 as amended. Recently, when we talk about the multi-party system, the people subscribe to national unity platform of Honorable Robert Chagulanyi. They came in. That is a very indicator that Uganda, under the national resistance movement, they embrace multi-party system.
So you're saying that the NUP is as a result of the multi-party dispensation?
Yes. Right now, when you look at one of their arms of government, which is Parliament, we have leader of opposition. Honorable Masias Mpuga is from NUP. And because it is constitutional, and that's an indicator of multi-party system, is enjoying whatever it is in the constitution. So I think that one should not be the topic. But what I can assure you is one. There is no organized group which takes over and wishes to leave. That one I should assure my colleagues. NIM, which I'm looking at, me personally, I wish to become a president of Uganda under my party. When you look at countries like South Africa, countries like Tanzania, they are still having a single political party which drive their countries. And when you look at their GDPs, and other economic relations, they are far better than our country Uganda. Because even now, our country Uganda, people have failed to have a national agenda. Instead, whatever comes in, they want to oppose it because they wish to be identified. But as a young person who wishes to see Uganda at a century, when we were celebrating 100 years, I wish to see a single political party or a single movement in our country Uganda. When you look at our country Uganda, we have very many structures. We have Youth League, we have Women League, and we have a national wing, if I may say so, whereby we have a chairperson of C1, whereby people have their right to stand there, any political movement they wish to stand in. We have councillors from parishes. We have councillors, elected councillors at LC5. We have chairperson of C5s. We have LMPs. We have East African MPs, whereby each and everybody has a right to stand, to contest in his or her own political wish. So, to summarize that, Uganda is moving forward under multi-party system. Maybe if there is a need plan B, members of opposition can wish to have a single political party in the country Uganda. That's my play actually.
Okay, just before I move to Juliet, just one more question to you, is that the NRA guerrilla fighters, they had a clear 10 points program that they set out to achieve. In your evaluation as a young person, how far have you gone with achieving those very good 10 points programs? Corruption, all those very good 10 points. How far have you gone?
Thank you so much. I'm not looking that direction of corruption. In any country,
no, there are many others, national unity points. And I cannot,
Thank you. When we talk about national party for it, when we have multi-party system, that is a national unity. We have it. That's why we have even a national unity platform and NLM. But to assure you, the national resistance movement, they have done their level best to achieve their 10-point programs. Right now, if we are to mark them, they're around 75%, and they're still progressing. And before you take off time, and in Uganda, we had a single mono. If it is a university, one university, a hospital, one hospital. If it's an MP, almost one. But right now, in Uganda, everybody is involved, which means people move forward. Somebody was talking about education. I attended the UPE. Me personally attended the UPE. That was an indicator of development, an indicator of economic growth and economic development. In our
Okay.
country,
Thank you, Osbert. I want to bring in Juliet. She has been quiet for some time. Juliet, what Osbert is trying to say, he's agreeing with what Dambisa Moyo said in her book, Dead Aid, that perhaps maybe African states are not ready for a multi-party dispensation, and that we need a single-party system where we have a benevolent leader. And I think that's what Osbert is trying to say.
Yeah.
So just from you, just a comment on that, but also, I would like to pick your insight regarding militarism in Uganda's politics. Do you think that the NRM is being unfairly castigated? Because when you go back to 1967, the way the pigeonhole constitution was brought into place, it involved the military surrounding parliament, and then MPs were forced to promulgate a constitution, then find it in their pigeonholes. But today we seem to castigate the NRM to say, no, it is them who have brought military in our politics. So those two concerns, you could respond to his assertions, but also the aspect of militarism in Uganda's politics. Do you think it is a new thing, or it has actually been there, and therefore the NRM perhaps is not the brainchild of this?
Well, I think history is just literally repeating itself.
Okay.
So when we see, military men, or when we see positions being, placed within the parliamentary system, where we are allowed to have military representatives, and we're in a situation when the last bit or the last cap that would, cause probably a probable kind of transition being removed. We saw the age limit. It's just literally history in itself repeating. So your question was, is the NRM being unfairly castigated? I would say that no, it's not being unfairly castigated, because the people are already aware that, you see, history, it's just literally repeating itself. But then going back to what Osbert said, as the NRM or NRA then, they came out, to fight for liberation, they so said. So my question back to him, or maybe you can help me pass it to him, is, do they think they have liberated Uganda from the history that occurred time memory? I don't think that they have, kind of liberated Uganda, because by the mere fact that we can still have military presence, within the parliamentary areas, and, within parliament itself, it shows just a repetition of history. So I think that what they set out to achieve as NRM, leading them to go in for a guerrilla war, is something that they have not achieved. Fine, at a particular point in time, when they came and there was the 1995 constitution, they were set in that right kind of lane. But then when they reached the 2000s, like Adikini said, everything really changed, and that is why we are having a repetition of history. So when people come and tell them that, you see, you're not literally doing anything beneficial for us, especially when it comes to the aspect of transition of leadership from one leader to another, they are actually right. What you're simply doing is bringing military men, something that Obote did when he was going to, bring in the pigeonhole constitution. It's literally the same pace that you're kind of taking. So what's my take? My take is that you are not any different from the Obote government, except for the fact that what you've tried to do is, create leverage in the fact that you're providing health systems, of which the health systems are actually still dilapidating, because we're still having so many cancer patients sleeping in the corridors of Mulago. You're trying to bring leverage of the fact that you brought in UPE and USE. We still have so many kids out there who are actually not in position to access what I would term as not just education, but I'm talking of quality education, because the space into which the globe is going in for right now is where we need to raise people who actually have the intelligence, the knowledge, and are able to compete in the global market. We do not just want, people who will be able to compete within the space of Uganda. We need people who will be able to compete into the global market. Do we see that? On a scale of 1 to 10, I would think that we are only just at 2. And so it's still a struggling stuff. And we are not any different. I would say it again, we are not any different from the era of Obote, except for the fact that there is leverage being created.
All right. Then secondly, is multi-party a very expensive venture? Because we spend so much of our national budget trying to organize elections whose outcomes are always questioned, were they free or fair? So Osbert is agreeing that, with what Dambisa Moyo said, that perhaps let's have a movement system where we spend less time and resources in, having elections, but rather we have a benevolent leader. So just a comment on that before I move to Harris.
I think it is not something expensive to deal with. We've seen Kenya actually achieve. But I think it's the question of implementation and above all honesty and sincerity. So what happens, you saw what literally happened in the recent Kenyan elections. Yes, and there was a space to petition, but above all there was at most fairness. So that takes me back to his assumption or assertion. I think what we lack right now in Uganda is the aspect of fairness, is the aspect of sincerity. Because when you watch elections and someone is giving 50,000 to every particular voter, what does that imply? It implies that that you're not being fair to yourself. And the mindset that you came out with, which was political liberation and above all free and fair elections, which were not existing then, because the reason as why you went to the bush was to fight such that you'd liberate the people and at the end of the day promote a system in which there would be free and fair elections. But with the election rigging, the ballot stuffing, do you think that is fair?
Those are
allegations fine. Of ballot stuffing and election rigging, do you think that is fair?
All right, good question. Osbert, perhaps you'll respond later, but let me bring in Right Honourable Speaker. Right Honourable, let us shift a bit to the economy. Post the Cold War, where the world was struggling between should we go communist or should we go capitalist. I think Uganda tilted more towards the capitalistic tendencies, and that is why in the 1980s we welcomed the structural adjustment programs that encouraged borrowing, encouraged public-private partnerships, encouraged privatization. And I think perhaps at the time, I think it was the right way to go because we had to open up the economy whereby we don't just have national players or maybe government having control over maybe transport or the economy in general, but rather open it up so that even private players are involved. So do you think that at the time, in the 1980s, it was right for us to move towards, to embrace the structural adjustment programs? Or has it had a role, because also it encouraged borrowing, and that's why World Bank and IMF, encourage African states to actually borrow. So just let's examine our economic decision in the 1980s when we embraced that program. Do you think it has played a role to where we are today, economically? And what is your evaluation?
Brilliant question. But before I respond,
I know you have.
I just would like to remind us about the ground rules, which I think that you had really echoed very well. That this is an invitation to an honest and a genuine intellectual discourse. That we owe our viewers, especially the young people, a duty and obligation to speak to them in a non-partisan, although we are partisan, but rather truthfully, genuinely and respectfully manner. It is a little bit unfortunate when we come here and then we want to be dishonest. I think we need to be a little bit more reflective in nature and look at the subject of the matter as it is. Because when my brother says that we have had elections, and he clearly knows, he knows the truth, that most of what we are talking about is a debate of form versus substance. Yes, it's called an election, but is it an election substance? But let me come to your question. But so, my brother, let's just be honest to our viewers and speak to them honestly. And even if it is my party at fault, I will speak to you honestly.
But Osbert made legitimate assertions, and he said that the NUP came up as a result of a democratic process. You displaced the FDC, which was the leading opposition party, as a result of a democratic process. You went through an election. So that is what Osbert is saying, that the party which you belong to emerged as a result of a democratic and elective process. Where is the wrong in that?
Well, truthfully, he knows that under the Constitution, if we wanted to register a political party, it is our right to register one. If it were, true rule of law. But he knows the path we used to get a national unity platform. We had originally wanted to register People Power, but we had to acquire a party which was already registered under the names clandestinely. He knows that. But even after acquiring that, he knows all the victimization, all the malice and wasteful sabotage that they have had to, have against the NUP because they don't want a strong party of young people. But that aside, up to date, we have more than 50 young people, all of them supporters of NUP, missing for 2 years now. Thousands and thousands are in Chugo, are in Chitaria, and other unknown ungazetted detention centers. He knows that. So whereas we talk about multi-party political dispensation, it is there on paper. It is there on our constitution. But is it there in spirit? And that is why I want us to why I would like to invite you for an honest engagement. Because when he says we had NUP brought members of parliament, isn't it known that we had military operation? Isn't it known that actually even we're about 2 years after that election, but we still have a lot of military presence everywhere? Isn't it true that we lost about 60 people in cold bloodshed? Was that necessary? Was that responsible of us? And while all that is taking place, our brothers and sisters in Kenya who had independence about the same period have had about 4 peaceful transitions. They just concluded the elections. No tear gas, no beating, no arresting opposition leaders. And in fact, the publicly supported candidate of the incumbent lost. And that's the beauty of democracy. So when Kenyans talk about multi-party democratic dispensation, they are right to talk about it. But Ugandans don't. If William, His Excellency William Ruto, or Bob Wine, we don't know what would have happened. So, I mean, that's a departure from your question, but I thought that it was a worthy response. Now, going back to the question of our economic journey, and you talk about the structured adjustment policies. Let me start by noting that at the time of our independence, we have peer nations that we compared economically with, nations like Singapore, nations like South Korea. As checking their GDP per capita, ours is just about $800 per person. And of course, this money is owned by just about 10%, but they distribute it mathematically. And we say GDP per capita is 800. Singapore has around 59,000 per capita. These are US dollars. South Korea, which we use to lend money. Those South Koreans, we used to lend them money. They are actually indebted to us, but their GDP per capita is 30 times higher than that. They have first-class healthcare system. They have first-class public transport system. They have a democratic election. The quality of life is very high. The respect of human rights is up there. They have truly, in the true sense of the word, moved from third world, first world in all aspects. So economically, when we are to assess this journey, you can see where we are, about 100 times where we would have been backwards. So specifically addressing your question of structured adjustment policy, of course, with the benefit of hindsight, it was a bad policy. It was introduced by these multilateral corporations, which are supposed to work for their mother countries. We know that these corporations, the IMF, the World Bank, they're introduced to engender certain interests, specifically for the Americans and the West at large. So that was in the wave of liberalization. We were moving under the mantra of free market, open market, no regulation. But recently, World Bank has gone back, said actually sometimes the forces of free market sometimes fail, and there's a need for the regulation. And when you even interrogate their history, None of those countries developed honestly without regulation, without government intervention, government coming in to support the local industries so that they can create jobs. But because they had strengthened their industries, their manufacturers were competent enough to compete at the global level, and they were producing excesses. They wanted markets. And the only way to guarantee those markets was to say, there is a big market in Africa. There is a big market somewhere. Let's open up.
Let's open up.
So they gave us debts, they gave us grants, but they were tagged on a condition, open up. Let the market be free.
For indirect investments.
Yes, so as I conclude, what does that show us? That as nations, especially of Africa, we are still lagging behind in terms of planning, in terms of engagement. When you come to a round table like this, and everyone is negotiating for their own interest, for the group you represent to go away with something worth it, you must be a competent negotiator. But in most cases, the African countries come to these negotiating tables when they have not done even basic research. So if they had had a culture of making decisions based on evidence, based on scientific research, based on empirical data, then they have said, look, whereas open markets favor you, you're competitive, it doesn't work for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Joyce, let me come to you. Still on the economy. Harris brings out an example of Singapore. Singapore's independence leader was Lee Kuan Yew, who was the prime minister, and he ruled for a very long period of time. But Lee Kuan Yew made a very controversial statement, and over again, he said that Singapore will not develop if I'm to encourage dissenting opinions. He said, I will rule with an iron fist. He emphasized that. So he somehow made issues around human rights secondary. It's like, for now, what is important to us is economic development. Do you think that Uganda finds itself between a rock and a hard place? We want to develop, but at the same time, the people like you are saying, no. You know, issues of human rights first. Now, for example, let's look at the oil pipeline. A project that has potential to literally overturn our economic journey and change the future of this country. But the people like you, because there is multi-party dispensation and because there are human rights now involved, you're saying, no, hold up. Please don't exploit our oil. First, compensate people. Now, that is contrary to what Lee Kuan Yew, the country that he is quoting, did not do. They said we shall develop irrespective of other things. So are we between a rock and a hard place?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll start by maybe adding some voice to what Aris, where he started from in regards to our political environment and the spirit of the multipartism. We got into multipartism through struggle. When the NRA took over, all parties were banned from operating as parties. And we had a movement system up to 2005, when the reform agenda struggles activists under the leadership of
But Joyce, between 1971 to 79, we didn't have political parties.
Neither did the NRM introduce it. So when the NRA took over power in 1986, they maintained that single-party system until, because you're very aware that when Kizza Besigye joined the political contest against President Museveni, he had to contest just as another independent candidate against President Museveni, and that the 5 years between 2000 and 2005 was for reform agenda struggling to reinstate multipartism. So we even had a referendum in this country for multipartism to get back into the system. So it is not something that the NRM wanted. And from that time on, much as the voices that were agitating for multipartism was too loud, and they took it on, they didn't take it on in the spirit of embracing it.
No, but you see, no, that is perhaps unfair, because the NRM says that in 2000 they had a referendum, okay, under the Referendum Act. And Ugandans said, no, we want our movement system. So it is
So
Ugandans
there
who
is-
chose in
there is-
2000
there
that
is
they
a-
want to remain with the movement system and
So
chose not to go multi-party. So how is that an issue of the NRM?
well, you are like Harris has said, you can give the same kind of feedback that yes, Ugandans in 2021 said we want President Museveni.
Exactly.
You get so it is just the same thing that we have all referendums and elections in this country have been taking the same shape. That if someone has power and interest, their power makes sure that the interest is achieved by all means, by hook or crook. So the reason why the 2000, is it actually, I think it was 2004, the
Yes.
referendum.
Yes.
The reason why it gave a feedback that the public wants a single party system is because that is what the regime wanted. But the reason why they eventually adopted a multi-party system is because despite lying to themselves during the referendum that this is what the public wants, it couldn't hold anymore. So we went into a multi-party system out of struggle, and the people who are leading the country are not yet comfortable with it. To this date, we can't hold rallies as opposition. We just, now it is only civic space here where we come and talk, and then we go to our offices. Sometimes they even ambush us there and beat us. So the space, the civic space for political party, for multipartism is not something that we can say the movement or the NRM government has an interest.
Okay, let's pick some economics.
Then now when we go back to the economics, the way you put it, I'm going to try to trace where we come from as a country. We've ever had someone like the president of Singapore, the prime minister before, that is President Idi Amin, who ruled by an iron fist. Okay? No human rights, no paying attention to any dissenting opinion, no parliament, no rule of law. How did it, where did it put us?
Actually, people have said that Uganda witnessed so much development under Idi Amin.
So
You
why
look at the
did,
Bugolobi flats,
why-
you look at
why
you know,
did-
all those
why did we
buildings.
still have people going to the bush to fight his government? People say the same thing about the Obote's regime, that most of the good hospitals that we still have and the schools were built during the Obote's regime. But we still had people going to the bush to confront that situation. And then right now, for the 38 years that we've had under NRM/NRA, indeed the rule has been by an iron fist. We are in a military rule. What are we achieving? So for me, the problem is...
Do you want to cite out some of those achievements?
It is
like
not...
our road network, for example?
Because we are comparing the
Access
level of
to
development.
electricity.
We are comparing...
And there are significant improvements.
Yes. So the question is...
But
the
Mr.
question that
Moderator,
you put to me.
Sorry, Adikini,
Yes.
to come in. Because I hear this quite often. You know, when mentioning the achievements of the NRM, they talk about the road network. But if you have a certain budget, let's say $100, and with it you can construct 100 roads. Your neighbor at Kenya constructs 100 roads or 80, and for you construct 30. Are you really? Do you have a right to go ahead and say the road networks? Because we could have had so much more. Please
No,
go.
yeah, of course, the issues of corruption notwithstanding.
Yes.
Yeah, but yes.
So anyway, you asked me to compare between the development of Singapore under the
Lee Kuan Yew.
Lee Kuan Yew, the transitioning leader from independence, and that of Uganda. So because of the nature of the leadership. The other one was a rule by an iron fist, according to his statement. And this one is, in your opinion, I think a rule by democracy, is it? So I am trying to compare in that context. And for my answer to this is, the issues that have affected our development is not the nature of the rule. It is not because of opposition that we do not have roads. Because I do not see a place where the opposition went and held a demonstration and said, you want to construct a road here, but we are not going to allow you to construct this road because these guys don't need roads.
Okay,
So no, I've not.
As you finalize.
Yeah, I've not finished. So it is not because of lack of that kind of rule of an iron fist. Even when you're ruling with an iron fist, I am sure there are certain things that you do not go an extreme to do to your own people. And that is where such leaders manage to control dissenting views. Because if you're going to rule, we have tough parents, but who give their children what they need. They don't deprive them in the names of being tough and wanting to develop them. So whereas he made that statement, he did not necessarily go on rampage on the citizens. He did not do all these things at the expense of their life. Yeah, he protected them in as much as he was not giving attention to things that are destructive towards the development of the country.
All right, thank you. Fair enough. Osbert, let me come to you. Still issues around the economy, all right? Last week I saw you are among the people who organized students to, demonstrate against the European Union resolution. And I think partly, yes, I think partly you had legitimate concerns that Uganda needs to develop, and to develop we must exploit our natural resources. And the students whose biggest fear is unemployment, who are in schools today, but they're not sure that after school they'll find a job. I think they had reason to say that, these guys, their actions are actually impeding the possibility of us finding employment after finishing our school. So perhaps let's explore that. Uganda needs to develop, yes, and we must muscle our natural resources and, empower ourselves as a country. But the concerns being raised by the European Union are, I think, fundamental issues. Perhaps issues around human rights and issues around, for example, climate change. So now the question is, where is the balance? Where is the middle ground? We must exploit these resources, but also how can we do so without preserving the rights of our citizens, but also not destroying the environment totally. But also this is not your chance to justify your actions of last week. Yeah.
You should start by telling us why you got the students, whether it was ethical to get the students, and why you could not get it.
No, those are students of sound mind and above 18, right? So
they were minors. Why you use the minors?
No. They're above 18, he said.
There were a bit burning issues. My friend talked about people dead in a cold war, cold blood, not so. So it has talked about there is no big difference between Uganda heading at a 60 and Uganda at a 62.
Political wise.
But I should inform you, Mama, Uganda, the curriculum we have been using in the education system has been a colonial rule curriculum. But recently, the government of National Resistance Movement had to review the curriculum of Uganda today. If you are not informed or if you don't have a brother or sister who is in the Senior and Senior 2, right now the curriculum of Senior and Senior 2 has been revised to make sure it is more practical to our country, Uganda. I should even inform you what is the cause of that. In Uganda currently, people are not well off, though people may expect it. One, most young people are not involved in production. And the moment you're not in production, don't expect surplus. People must die. Okay?
People must what?
People must die because at early age because they have nothing. They cannot purchase goods and services because nothing in the market. Okay? So my assurance still is one. The moment the country adopts fully the new curriculum, which is fully in the practicals, our country Uganda will be at peace. She has talked about right now in Uganda today, people are dying on sheds and sheds at hospitals. What I should inform you, if you're not aware, before 1986, we had serious killer diseases, 6 killer diseases in our country, Uganda, whereby dying and not dying was debatable. But right now, it is very difficult for a Ugandan to die at an early age. So that one had to bring a cause or a result of a high population of young people. Uganda is a leading country globally having young people. That's why we are here. Everybody in Uganda is young. But they didn't plan. How much they plan to make sure Ugandans are safe? They didn't plan for jobs. Okay? That's why we are very many. But I'm assurance to you, anytime Uganda is going to be the best country than never before. My brother talked about people who died in the Cold War. That is a military statement. Maybe you should make a bit of research. When you die in a Cold War, it's like
Cold blood.
God blood. You have given yourself to be killed. Okay, that's why
They are shot from the streets of
I
Kampala.
should inform you again. If you say cold blood, which
yes.
means you are presenting yourself to be killed. I would like to call back the statement of late Elito Mwine, General, what he said. They can shoot you and they kill you when you go at a certain beyond of violence. I'm not happy because Ugandans were killed, because we lost as a country. But your statement from Noop, it was a cold blood, which means you...
What do you understand by cold blood?
You know, it's like if you are a member of army, you are supposed to move with escorts. But intentionally, you have left your escorts at home. You are just moving.
No, these were civilians. These were civilians at Nasa Road,
if they're civilians, why do you use a military statement? So withdraw it, then we discuss.
Cold blood is not a military statement.
According to you, I don't know which dictionary. You can look for it, then you'll understand it. You are supposed to move with escorts, but you are in the arena of an enemy without escorts. What do you expect? They will kill you. Well, you have asked me now I should come back on a table. Recently, we had an involvement. I was good. I was not a chief mobilizer. Uganda National Students Association. It is an umbrella which unites all students of Uganda under the Parliament of Uganda. We have NUSU before UNSA. But when Ida Mindada came in, he had to scrap off all the movements of young people which could organize people to discuss issues of national importances, even in relation to academics. But when Museveni took over, he had to say, let us have young people discuss their matters. That's why currently we have a National Youth Council, we have a National Youth Parliament, we have UNSA. But to be specific on what happened recently, it was a response to European Union Parliament, what they discussed about. Their major areas were environment and human rights, I think. Yes. Environment and human rights. If I should inform you, it's only in Uganda where anybody can oppose the government directly and you are protected. That is human rights. What I should assure you, the countries which you benchmark on, like countries like America. In America, not everybody has a right to vote, if you are not aware of that. Few people who can contribute greatly, they have a right to vote for the president. It's in the Senate. Senate which decides who should take over.
No, that is not true,
the mantle. You'll make a research.
No, that's wrong.
I think that there is both adult suffrage. There's the popular vote, and then there's the college system.
Actually, the college system is ceremonial.
The electoral colleges.
Yes, the citizens of America actually vote.
No, I think we must understand the mischief behind his submission. It is that he is trying to draw from the Trump election, whereby Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but then lost at the electoral college, which was,
that is
perhaps the mischief of his argument.
That is highly qualified.
My brother, I gave
that's highly qualified.
My brother,
he's misrepresenting it.
Not down. You'll come in at the right time.
No, we can't allow you to misguide the viewers, and then you go on.
It's okay, but
it's a conversation
which we have in Uganda. People have refused adamantly to respect people's voices. We talked about many stuff, so I kept quiet to answer you. Clinton, she didn't sworn in as a president. You know somebody who sworn in as a president. The country Uganda, right now, this is a civic space. We are giving our understanding the way we wish our country to move on. And we're allowed. There is nobody here to militarize us, but to express our feelings. Uganda, last time when we had our movement, I should not go very far, we were called upon by the UNSA structures. We have leaders. It was emergency General Assembly. for students leaders of Uganda. Okay? When we are called upon, we discussed about many matters. The matters we talked about, we had a plan to go back at school campaign. I think in lockdown, you heard about it when schools were closed. It's only UNSA, which was on the front line to discuss matters of opening schools. It's only UNSA, which requested the government of Uganda to make sure border borders are allowed to move in order to transport students of Uganda to go back at schools. We discussed about it. Recently, when we had our emergency meeting, we had there was a note from the Ministry of Education under the Department of UNEB. Every student of Uganda to make sure they subscribe 2,000 for the easy running of the association. So there were matters, a matter of giving them accountability. Then the issue of European Union against Uganda's development, it was a national importance issue which we were supposed to discuss. And leaders, the responsibility of leaders is to give the sense of direction to the entire world. What happens is what? Right now in Uganda, we have a big population of younger people. They are not deployed, they are not employed. We are just there on the streets of Wandega, on the streets of Wakso, on the streets of Kigezi, on the streets of Guru, just doing nothing. But the amount of oil toward development is to employ many Ugandans. I have heard many people saying, His Excellency, the President of Uganda, said, my oil. Let alone he's saying our oil. On my own understanding, His Excellency, the President of Uganda, is a first citizen of Uganda. Is a fountain of honor. He represents Uganda in heaven and on the earth because he was voted and entrusted by the majority of Ugandans. Okay? I should assure you of that.
Represents us in here.
No, my brother. Don't tell me right. Don't urge on in that direction. So when His Excellency, when he was discussing, he said, saying our oil. So we as younger people who have a wish to take over the mantle of leadership of Uganda, we looked at it wisely. We must resist the idea of an European. You saw what happened when African presidents went that side England, how they had to put them in one vehicle, as if they were high school students heading for.
So I think you've made a very good claim and you justified the actions that you took last week. And I think good argument. Let me just move to Juliet. Juliet, the East African crude oil pipeline presents a fundamental opportunity. But above all, the geopolitical advantage is that it is going to perhaps unite East African community much more because it will pass through, I think, almost 2-3 countries. So it's an opportunity for EAC to actually come together and coalesce around a common issue. Many people have argued, more so those who are pro-Eacop, they've said that perhaps the actions by the European Union is an act of sabotage, that they are perhaps fearful of an emerging federation of African states and the threat that it poses to their neocolonial tendencies. In your own view and perspective, do you think that the European Union and their actions is an act of sabotage? Because their concerns are not new, okay? The concerns of human rights, I think Ugandans have been having agitations around human rights for some time now. Why should they come now at a time when our pipeline is about to begin and they're saying, hey, no, guys, hold up, the issue of human rights is actually very important, okay? But also, there are other countries that have been at the forefront of violating human rights, okay? But also, I know that Germany just issued around 53 new licenses to crude oil refinery companies not so long ago. And the European Union has not come out to say, no, guys, this is wrong. So do you think that the European Union and their actions is an act of sabotage for Africa's economic development, but also for our integration as a region?
Yes, I do think it's an act of sabotage. And in my opinion, I think they feel Eacop and maybe the integration of East Africa community countries could probably limit, the direction of neocolonialism that, they keep trying to push in for. I would not disagree with them if they came out on the basis of environmental issues. But then when it comes to issues of human rights, I'll give you another example. You gave an example of Germany. Let me give you an example of Venezuela. Venezuela is known for, how best can I put it? It's known to be one of those countries that, does not actually give respect when it comes to matters of human rights. But what do we see? We see there, oil still flourishing in one way or another. So for me, it's an act of sabotage. It's a limitation to their practice of neocolonialism. But then I'd like to first of all hint on something that he said. He made an assumption that, you see, the matter of oil is literally for job creation for all Ugandans. Okay, so I'd like to know, time and again, recently we had PDM coming on board. We've had issues of yoga. We've had, what else? Quite a number of other issues as, the government brings up on board to help create jobs for the people. But have they functioned? And what guarantee do you have that the oil pipeline is actually going to function a lot better as compared to PDM and yoga to help boost the job system and reduce the unemployment rate?
Moderator, maybe
And
I think just allow it first, put the question.
then you also made an assumption of the fact that there is a new curriculum, and you talked of the fact that, you see, the new curriculum is actually going to boost the education system. And what are we going to have? We're going to have a reduction still in unemployment. And you blamed the fact that we have been having high illiteracy rates simply because there was poor planning. I'd like to know, prior to the new curriculum, was there planning? Yes, I do have a sibling. He's in senior 2, you get. But right now, as I speak to you, the teachers are still unaware. They're not cognizant of what they're supposed to teach these students. So you see, it is very unfair for you to come and say that it is the new curriculum that is actually going to cause an overhaul in the current situation or status of unemployment. Back to the Eacop. I think that for me, Eacop's argumentation on the basis of human rights, of limiting the proceedings of Eacop on the basis of human rights, are unfair. There are other issues that actually affect human rights a lot more in Uganda. For instance, we are not allowed as Ugandans to have peaceful demonstrations. Fine, UNSA came up on board, and what did they were actually given a police lead car, you get. But imagine a situation where students who are in the opposition are given an opportunity or want to demonstrate, what will happen? There is going to be a lot of tear gas.
So are you saying that the students that marched were not partly opposition and partly NRM?
I'm not trying.
I don't know.
I'm not trying.
It's not all the students were, NRM thinking.
They were for the cause that the NRM approves of.
Exactly. That is the direction I'm trying to perceive at it.
But is that a cause for NRM or for Uganda?
Well, he claims it's a cause of national importance, but I am looking at the basis or the circumstances that were surrounding. You get.
Okay, anyway, just lastly, before we take a short commercial break, our time is fast spent. But you seem to suggest that the issues of human rights being raised by European Union are not water holding.
They are not water holding in relation to Eacop. Fine, I understand there is that aspect of compensation, but then I would like them to demystify themselves and focus a lot more on matters that actually, occur on ground in relation to abuse of human rights.
Okay, how about the issue of climate change?
The issue of climate change. Now we get to that.
Because NEMA actually gave us an environmental assessment.
Exactly. And I think that is what we should go by. NEMA, even Total in itself, carried out an environmental impact assessment. Now, I will always stick to the fact that Africa on a global space just contributes 4%, you understand, to the global emission. And I know that you asked me this question of, is it then justifiable for us to continue emitting? No, it is not justifiable for us, fine. But I think that if European Union wants to paint an example for us as Africans in relation to pollution and carbon emissions, then they should start with themselves. Recently, recently in COP22, we expected them to put a halt on production of coal and usage of coal. But what did they do? They instead promoted a reduction. Yes. So there is a bit of, biasness that they're trying to put on us. Yeah. And yes, I'm not trying to say that there is not going to be an impact in terms of, oil production. It's definitely going to be there. But I think that the example should start with them. Yeah. And if at all they want us to put a halt on the oil, then let them give us a credible alternative. Let them support those alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, because they have new plans to drill in Alaska and in the Arctic Sea. So I think you're right. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Colleagues, our time is fast spent. Let's just take a short commercial break. I know they're burning concerns. Clearly, I can see.
On Eacop. Because I think that the substantive issues of the European.
Can we begin from that after the break?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, to our viewers, thank you for being with us on the Youth Roundtable. We know that you have concerns and comments as well. If you agree or disagree with any of us here, please, there's a comment section right below this video. Give us your comments, let us know what you think. But above all, stay with us because you're shortly after this break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Yes, we'll be back from that short commercial break, and thank you for staying with us. Well, just to dive straight to the point, Juliet had made a point, and Harris, I think you had concerns and comments regarding Eacop, and particularly because your party leader seemed to suggest in his statement that the European Union was actually right, you know, and that whatever was being suggested or being alleged in that document was actually substantial. So, is your party counter progress or counter development of Uganda?
Thank you very much. You know, my colleagues, there is a very interesting book. Even has an interesting title. It is called The Pig That Wants to Be Eaten. And in that book, the author says that in most intellectual discussions, or most public debates, 90% of the time is spent discussing the noise, not the real substance, not the actual issue. In other words, those things disguising themselves as the issue, but when actually those things are not an issue at all. Earlier on, and this is in line with the Eacop discussion, we're discussing, you know, you asked us a question related to the best form of governance for development. And when you look at the data, the development data, going back 60 years across nations of the world, what you see is that there are dictatorships which have developed, and there are democracies which have developed. In other words, whether it is democracy or dictatorship, you always have development. That points us therefore to the nature of development. But what the data also shows is that most of the developed nations are also democratic nations. So there is this fallacy that democracy hampers development. That is not true, because we have several nations which are doing very well. When you look at the progress of Kenya, for example, we have Botswana and Uganda, we have Mauritius here. They're doing quite well, but these are democratic nations. So it's a lie. It's a lie that we need a strong, benevolent man there as a figurehead directing the nation. In fact, it's risky to have your hands to have your matters of a nation in the hands of a dictator, because should this dictator go off track, then you're in big trouble, just like we are in Uganda. So if we had strong institutional frameworks, you're always very sure that there's enough safeguards that are always going to bring the nation back on track. But the danger with dictatorship is that this strong man, once he goes off track, then the country is going to go off track for so long. And let me come to Eacop. because we are saying, look, you guys in the NUP are not patriotic enough. You are stopping jobs, you're stopping GDP growth. But we have the case of Equatorial Guinea. It is one of the leading producers in Africa. Not actually Africa, I think it's in the top 5 in the entire world. Equatorial Guinea. Its leader has been there for 40 years. The deputy president is the son, and he's going for another round. But it is one of the most corrupt nations. When you go there, the socio-economic indicators of the citizens of Equatorial Guinea, some of them are among the worst in Africa. We have cases of Nigeria and many other oil-producing countries. So where you have a country like Uganda, and this statistic is by the is from the report of the IGG, the current one, Honorable Betty Nambozi. Betty Kamya, thank you very much. She says that 30% of the budget is embezzled. And this is prima facie. Our corruption is in the face of everyone to see. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when is the other road going to be eaten? When is the other hospital going to be eaten? And this is widely acknowledged. So where you have 30% of the budget being eaten year in, year out, means if you bring in $2 billion, it's not going to help a lot. It is going direct in the pockets of the top 10. Will the jobs also be eaten? Yes, there will be. Jobs that will be created? There's a number of jobs which are going to be created. But these jobs are going directly to a few. And the 90% of the country is going to be left on the fringes. And our argument basically is, let's first establish a governance framework that ensures equity, that ensures justice and fairness for everyone. Because this is a big national resource that we want to benefit the country. We don't want it to be squandered. We would want it to be spent in the most way possible. Because in terms of development, we are in a ditch, a 100-meter ditch. And when you have that kind of silver bullet, you want to use it in the most effective manner. So when you have a lot of leakages, a lot of wastages, a lot of inefficiencies, you don't want to have that resource because it is a finite resource. It's not going to be there forever. It's a finite resource we are talking about. But European Union just a moment. Issues of corruption. Just a moment, yes. And I'm coming to that because my second point was about the dishonesty among our leaders. Because when Europeans and other donors, mainly from the West, give us grants, because you know that a significant part of our budget is financed by the Europeans. So when they give us 60% of our health sector is financed by Europeans. A lot of technical advice to the government is by Europeans. Our civil society, Europeans. So when they are giving us all these monies to run the government, they are not interfering with our development.
We just keep asking.
When they are cancelling debt, because under Museveni's regime, the Europeans have cancelled debt twice. So when they are doing all this, they are not interfering. But when they say, wait a minute, there's something wrong. In the 21st century, people should not be disappearing. People should not be dying. There must be respect of human rights. When they say, hold on, the corruption is too much, be accountable, be transparent, then that is interference. I think that's a double standard. And we need to approach this.
Are the Europeans also having double standards?
We need to approach this with honesty, because we must look at the question the Europeans are raising objectively. And what are they saying? They have encouraged. Actually, by the way, because their resolution.
I don't know which funding we get from European Union.
No.
European Union has countries like Greece, countries like Sweden, countries like France. Uganda doesn't get support from those countries. Perhaps maybe UK. I agree that UK aid and US aid funds our health sector largely. But that is UK. That is not European Union. You know that UK left European Union.
What about the Germans?
Yes.
What about Scandinavian countries?
But you see, all
No,
those...
no, what about the Scandinavian countries? What about France?
And that's why I'm asking you,
Yes.
that are they being honest in their interventions in Uganda? Because I don't think they're giving us the most.
I think
Our
that,
funding largely comes from the East.
well,
From China,
I don't think so.
Russia.
That is of late when you're trying to run away from...
I don't think so. China is
the
of yesterday.
system.
And I can assure you, when data starts coming in, you see that China is another form of another devil.
Where is IMF instituted or World Bank?
World Bank and IMF, of course, these are Western.
America.
These are Western.
Yes.
These are Western nations.
Exactly.
But you see, when a European speaks, these are strong allies of America. These are Democrats. These are shared values. These are shared values as Democrats. But without losing the point, my brother Kidega,
Okay.
is that there is dishonesty in our talk. That when Europeans say, because they are not saying stop Eacop. They're not saying stop Eacop. They're not saying don't extract the oil. That is not what they are saying. And I heard my brother saying that I think it is you who gave the statistic of the licenses that have been given by the German authorities for extraction of oil. That is okay, because the rich god of German in terms of respect of human rights is clear. The record of most European countries in terms of respect for human rights is very clear. What we are talking about and what the Europeans are saying is that, look, it's okay, it's an important resource. We would like it to benefit the Ugandans. But there are glaring issues which need to be paid attention to before you can embark on this project. And as far as we can encourage our companies such as Total to first hold on cooperation, we shall do so for the greater interest of Ugandans. But because, like what I started with, the pig that wants to be eaten, we'll say, all right, let's mobilize kids, let's mobilize children from schools, and say our oil, this kid doesn't even know what Eacop means. And that's a dishonesty. You fail to go to Kawempe.
No.
Makeri is there.
Aren't you being inconsistent, Harris?
Yes.
Because if you want this kid to know what Eacop is, then now you want us to focus on the form and not the substance.
No. My
Yet
point.
earlier on, your argument was that
elections
elections have the form but not the substance. But now here you want us to choose.
No. My point in that, my brother,
because
is
I don't think it matters whether they know what Eacop means in full. For as long as they know that this oil is good for us as a country.
It is their right to protest, but this right is not an ambiguous right. You ought to exercise that right when you know the full extent of the right you exercise.
I want to bring in Joyce. Thank you, Harris. Osbert, just 1 second. I'll give you a chance, but I want to give Joyce a chance just after Harris. Joyce, let's evaluate your party's foreign policy a little bit. Because whereas I know you are a young person of independent mind, you also, if we are to go by the collective responsibility principle, then you're bound by your party decision at some point, right? And your party is one that said, I think for the first or second or a few cases supported the NRM and said, yes, you are right to say that Uganda will not abide by the European Union resolutions. That was your party leader. Correct me if I'm wrong. But you seem to be, your party, and in assumption yourself, is in support of the Eacop pipeline, contrary to what another opposition party is saying. So what difference do you have between the two of you?
There is no difference, and you are wrong. And actually, my party came out to correct that. It was a New Vision headline that said FDC supports a government on Eacop. But what we actually say, before the European Union writing anything, the FDC was clear from the beginning of the oil project on issues that the EU has raised. So in other words, what we said is, please, if the problem is a colonialist saying something and giving us directives on what we should do, please ignore theirs and do ours that we have proposed as Ugandans. That is what FDC said. So in other words, what we had always agitated for as the opposition as FDC was the same issues that the European Union has raised. Issues of human rights, people not being compensated, people being kept in IDP camps when their land has been taken over for oil and they are not being taken care of. Those are issues that we raised. And we had put our feet down that we do not support the issue of going ahead to explore oil without addressing those matters. Issues of environmental conservation and ensuring that our development does not lead to massive destruction. These are issues that we had placed. So we just said, well, if you have a problem with the white man or with the colonialists directing you on how you should develop your country, please ignore them and attend to the issues that we raise, which are exactly the same. So we do not disagree with the NUP on what they are saying. And that is why...
Can I just read for you a tweet from your political party, the FDC, on Twitter? And they say, the oil sector, we support all efforts aimed at extracting and selling Uganda's oil, including the construction of a refinery, pipeline, and other infrastructure. The country has invested heavily in the oil sector and cannot afford to delay its sale. This is the Forum for Democratic Change.
As far as I know, we made a clarification on the issue of oil.
So you're
and
not sure
I don't have my phone.
direction.
I am sure. I don't have my phone here.
I'm just showing you
but I would go to our page. Well, I do not know which page you're in, but I would go to our page
FDC Twitter
and
handle.
extract that.
Verified.
Nowadays, there are so many pseudo.
I am very confident about. I am very confident about our position on the issue of extracting oil vis-a-vis the human rights issues, vis-a-vis the environmental issues and the economic issues. So we do not in any way deviate from what the National Unity Platform stands for. And for me, it takes me back to the fact that as a country, we don't listen to each other. We don't want to listen to our own citizens. And again, at the same time, we don't want foreigners to comment on what we are doing. So in other words, our government wants to go scot-free without anyone telling them what to do. Because had we to listen to each other, then the foreigners wouldn't have to be there telling us, please, make sure there's democracy in your country. Because by now, the government would have listened to all these people who are talking within the country before even going to EU. But look what happens. When National Unity Platform in Parliament, through the leader of opposition, tables a motion, they ignore it like a passing wind. Then when EU writes just a paper, they go and demonstrate. That means that we are being treated like secondary citizens. We are not being given the kind of value we deserve as citizens. They don't think we matter. Then you were saying, when Harris was talking, you said, we do not get much from EU. That the EU is not.
But I mean, aren't you being unfair? Because your political party and Harris's have on several occasions sought intervention from the white man. We have seen you demonstrate in Seattle, demonstrate elsewhere, trying to draw attention of the white man.
Because they are the ones funding the impunity. Their funds are being misused. They send us funds for the construction of roads. Then the funds that are supposed to construct roads are diverted to the military to come and brutalize us.
Joyce, when the NRM pays attention to concerns from the European Union, they are being non-Pan-African. When Harris's party goes to Seattle to demonstrate and to Netherlands at the NIMD offices to demonstrate, they are doing the right thing. And it being unfair.
No, that is actually not what I am saying.
Analysis and evaluation.
I am not. That is not actually what I am saying.
Mr. Kidega, I think what my sister is saying is that no, we are okay because we are okay with NRM talking to the European Union. They have been dealing with Europeans or with the West for so long. Even at the inception, when Mr. Museveni was coming to power, he was helped by the Europeans. Yeah, you go and inquire from them. You seem to disagree. You can talk to them. What we are saying, our point is, don't praise them. Don't acknowledge them as development partners when they are giving you resources. But then name call them colonialists and so forth when they hold you accountable. When they say your human rights record looks bad, and then you want to say, look here, this is Africa. You want to remind us of the colonial history. You run away from the fact that yesterday you were saying they are our development partners. But when they say, please be accountable, you say, you colonialist. That is the point that I think there's no contradiction.
Harris has hoped to make that point. I want to bring in
But
Osbert.
just to conclude on the point that I was making, we have a lot of resources that are being extracted from this country, and those resources are not necessarily helping us as citizens. So I don't want any of us here to look at things from face value. We have gold being mined from Karamoja, okay? And Karamoja is the poorest region in this country. And gold is the most expensive thing in market, okay? So it is those issues that bring up all this thing of majority of the country siding with a foreign entity who is seemingly speaking for them. Because if our own government and the people who are extracting our resources do not care about what we become, then it ceases to be ours and it becomes theirs.
Okay.
Aris talked about the issue of jobs and the kind of people who are going to benefit. In 2012, when I joined Makerere, is when the talks of oil had just started coming and taking shape. I remember a number of people from children from good families were sponsored to go abroad and start the petroleum courses. You remember that time? So they have already even taken them to school and they are already waiting to go and get employed. Okay? Me and who are not...
But there is a school just here in Shigumba.
There is a school in Shigumba, and of course even in Makerere there is a petroleum course. But what I'm saying is the people who are supposed to work in this particular one were already trained. Okay. Just like I am a graduate of a certain course, but I do not have a job in a certain sector of government.
Let's hear from Osbert. Thank you, guys. Osbert, just my question to you is that, how should I put it? In 1948, nations, League of Nations say that there is need for us to develop and declare international, human rights, if I'm to call it. Uganda went ahead to ratify this very good declaration a couple of years later on. But I think not so long ago, I think either last week, the former Prime Minister, Right Honorable Walakira, said that the European Union should not lecture us on human rights. Okay? So does it mean that Uganda wants to define its own standards of human rights, but also respond to the concerns being raised by Harris and Joyce that, the NRM regime seems to use the Pan-African argument when they're trying to maybe shield European Union or shield the Western powers, but then, disclaim it when they're trying to, I don't know. So are there certain mismatches between...
Thank you so much. We are debating, but we must recall some of the best words of our grandfathers in the early 90s towards the nationalism and independence of African countries. I'd like to bring it on the table to my brother and my sister. European Union, under the leadership of Europeans, one day they conquered Africa by force. They taught us how to pray, how to eat, and how we should sustain ourselves. By then, words like a disciple, a follower, and a pagan, they were introduced to minds of Africans. As much aware, understanding takes time. All of us who have been participating in education, but a lecture of last semester cannot get it in the first semester. It's a process. I would like to appreciate the best Africans who have brought the concept to current era so that Osbert can debate the issues of national importance. Europeans, they are the big enemies of Africa. They have told us more about human rights, but they don't do that. We have seen many black Africans being mistreated in Saudi Arabia, in America, because of their color. But I've never heard any European saying, please, Saudi Arabia, stop this. We have been smartly following and telling our brothers and sisters how a white person hates Africa. And with time, even my brothers and sisters, they will agree.
And that's why perhaps Otto von Bismarck convened them and said, let us divide and partition Africa. You take this, I take this.
So
plunder.
It was a struggle to make sure they give us lines. It's when they said, this is Uganda, this is East Africa, this is in Somalia, Sijuapi. Everything was blocked to disorganize us. But it's on record. Some of our own brothers and sisters who are now grands, they said, let us have East Africa, let us have African Union, in order Africa to be one person. When we keep quiet here, nobody can say you're from Kanungu, they cannot say you're from Uganda, nobody can even say that man is from Somalia, if we keep quiet. But somebody had to group us in different groups. It's we are on time, we should resist that. We are much aware. An African kid, an African child, he was given a theoretical part. This is a plant, this roots, stem, and flowers. Nothing else. But they could not go in deep to say, if you take a lot, you are going to secure this disease. It's on record. We have discovered that. That's why I want to tell my sister, the new curriculum we're looking at, she was like, even teachers are not aware of a new curriculum. But it's by process. In 10 years, 5 years, everybody in Uganda will be in a sense of production, and Uganda will develop. We as UNSA, we as young liberators of Africa, it was of much importance to call our own brothers and sisters, inform them about Eacop. You get, my brother? So that they can get that part. I can assure you, my brother, my sister, even if a white person comes to say, I want this oil, nobody can accept that. Because they are much aware. We must inform them at the right time.
But 70% of the oil is actually being taken to the
My
foreigners.
sister, where did you get
So what is the
from?
difference?
Let us not argue.
That's also not true.
Let us not.
That's not true.
She was claiming some students from Makerere, early 2012, they were taken on scholarship. They were taken on scholarship in order to understand petroleum to come and save Ugandans. It was a sample. That was an indicator of showing that Uganda is ready at the right time.
Next point was that the selection was not meritorious. It was for the sons and daughters of those in power.
But then you were at Makerere, which means you're among the best people in our country.
But I wasn't selected.
But maybe you never want to reach at a certain level, which they wanted. So, but that let it not look to be.
We know those who are at the bottom of the class.
Let us not urge on that. But the fact is, as a country, we must know our strengths.
We must resist neocolonialism.
When you look at the young Americana, they tell them every resource across the world, especially in Africa, belongs to America. But here, everything in Africa, everything in Uganda belongs to a white man. We must consult them before in order to guide us on what to do. But we're at a point where we are saying, Apana, we can't tolerate that.
So meaning these two are anti-Africa. But anyway, just one last question. Total Energies is the biggest funder of this Eacop project. Around 64% of the money going into this project is coming from Total, which is the France, company, if I'm to call it. Should it happen that Total succumbs to the pressure being levied on it from European Union, what alternatives do you think we have as a country to finance this project?
No, thank you so much.
Because the president said that with or without European Union, we shall proceed. So what other alternatives of financing are
we
there?
have an evidence from this mother of mine. She has said in 2012, some Ugandans were taken outside to understand much about petroleum. Yes. That is an indicator. Uganda, we are looking at an issue of being an independent country. And I should assure you, Uganda, we are focused. Me personally, I'm not ready to
how will that finances?
Now, let me tell my brother, when you hear head of state saying, with or without you, we are ready to progress, which means there is an alternative source of that.
Demonstrations.
Not a demonstration, because if they say we are
if you have money, why are you demonstrating? You will just ignore them and proceed.
Let me bring it on a board. When you look at our country, we are looking at petroleum. It's like, what if they say Total Energies are like, we are not part of you?
Which they have said.
Not yet. Not yet. That is European Union. Total Energies hasn't come out to...
Wait for that. You are much aware. Sometimes back, they wanted us not to deal with our crude oil. We should export it as almost a raw material. But we resisted. We said, no, or want to give it a certain value in order to get much about it. I would like to call a table. We as Ugandans, let us hesitate from any other argument, but let us look at our oil. We look at how can we build our own manpower. We as Uganda, we as Africa, and we progress. Instead of calling again for people to come and sponsor us, I should like to inform my members on this panel tonight. Some are almost starting sponsoring Ugandans to argue towards the issue of petroleum. When I hear certain gentleman, an MP, saying, why are you using younger people? Issues of Eacop. They are even not aware of it. Who should tell them? It's us to inform them. I was expecting even chambers of parliament to say, let us move forward. Somebody was claiming...
Why not telling young people about human rights?
My brother, let me tell you something. When you talk about human rights, we have discussed a lot. We have given, UNS has given statements about strikes which are taking place in universities. Our statements have been honored. But as you are aware, we have told even our students, if there is something you don't understand, for the protocol, if you have a peaceful demonstration, let it be peaceful. How we came out with a success when we had our mobilization of peaceful demonstration? We informed people in a law what was our cause, because it was a meeting. And one was like, we used younger people. Maybe the media didn't capture university students of Makerere, university students from Chambogo, from St. Lawrence, but they're not talking about them because they want to bring.
It was actually illegal.
Okay.
And unethical because most of those students, I don't know if they're students or pupils, marching on the streets were minors. I don't know which schools actually. I know my colleagues, Mr. Kidega, I know colleagues from the law school who are actually going to sue the schools because for the students to participate in this, conversation, in a demonstration, when they're supposed to be, that was not an extracurricular activity. It was not a school program. That is that's a demonstration on the street of Kampala. Just a moment, for a minor. Do you know who a minor is? Someone below the age of 18 under our constitution. Most of them, I can bring you pictures, you know it. You prove it in court. And it is unethical, it is immoral, it is illegal, and it is opportunistic that you did. But Harris, and you should also have done it
I'm going to repeat it.
No, Osbert, hold up. What is illegal about pupils participating in a demonstration?
In a demonstration. Not being used, not participating,
hold up. What is illegal about that?
Those students were being used. First of all, there was a need for parental consent.
No, because these students were under the authority of the school.
Because we know that
if the teachers consented,
we know.
No. That is not because do parents consent on what mode of exams should be given to students?
Yes,
they don't consent on that.
But by the time the
school regulates.
But Mr. Moderator,
the school regulates.
The school presents the curriculum to the parents.
Mr. Moderator, are the students, minors, the right people, speak to the Europeans by way of a demonstration about a national matter?
Are they Ugandans?
Yes, they are in national. Just a moment.
Is the issue of Eacop a preserve to only those above 18?
Listen, why don't they vote?
No.
Do you know the reason why the Constitution has said? Do you know the reason why the Constitution has said? Just a moment. Do you know the reason why the Constitution has said that those pupils that we are marching on the street?
My brother, we had students.
Osbert with your colonial name, because Osbert is your colonial name.
Arinda, you are calling it Arinda.
Your colonial name, which you have refused to read.
Even if they were minors,
but let me make my
what
point.
Illegality
Because he has a colonial element on him by maintaining the name Osbert.
But
let me make my point. My point is the same reason.
What constitutional provision was violated?
The point is that was not a school activity. The same reason why those kids cannot go on the ballot and choose their president is the same reason that is a legislative matter. That is a national strategic
issues because
voting
is different.
But this is a national matter.
Voting is different.
This is a national matter which these kids are not competent about. Their time is going to come. I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about.
They are being taught about the East
just
African
a moment. Yes, I'm not taking
railway every day.
Don't rep.
Yeah?
Are they ready for sex?
SST.
Are they ready for sex?
No,
why don't they have sex?
That is a biological issue.
Yeah, exactly.
The same reason.
The same reason. Just one moment. It's my colonial brother. The same reason why these kids are not allowed to have sex now under our constitution. The same reason why they cannot exercise their rights to vote is the same reason they should not have been brought on the street, because they are not yet of the competence to be on that street.
But then they have the competence to be taught about the East African railway.
Yes, they do.
They're in the process of
Yes,
developing their competence.
they are developing their competencies, but they are not yet there.
My brother, let me make it clear.
My name is Akampurira, Walakira.
It's okay.
Yes.
Akampurira, I'm Arinda. Let us make it
Osbert.
Now, we are not depending
Actually, if there's anyone who has a colonial name, it is him. He is called Harris. There is Prince Harris of where? Of UK.
That one I don't know, but Harris is not my name.
There is Prince Harris of UK.
Let's proceed.
So at least you Osbert at least.
Osbert was a symbol of Northumbria.
Let's proceed.
We as UNSA,
Hey, I have to bring in Juliet. So summarize, please.
UNSA is not PTA, okay? UNSA, it's for students. We never had pupils. So we know your word pupils. We never had any pupil. We had students leaders.
They are minors. They were minors. You should go and apologize.
In my statement before you came in.
Just 1 minute, please. Don't allow him to.
I said.
You have 1 minute. Strictly.
I have said, it's time, our time, to make sure we liberate ourselves. Not saying what does the Constitution say, because sometimes we don't need to look at the Constitution, but deliberating ourselves. Really? When you benchmark on a constitution, which is from Europe,
I think as
I think you should.
As a law student, I beg to disagree with
when you are looking at
withdraw. Allow me move to Juliet. Juliet, we have addressed politics. We have addressed certain economic issues. Let's move to the social aspect, right? And perhaps maybe we could put on the aspect of affirmative action. Uganda has ever since had articles like Article 32 that provides for affirmative action to empower groups of society that were disenfranchised and disempowered because of historical, issues. Today, Uganda is a country where the vice president is a woman, the prime minister is a woman, the speaker of parliament is a woman, cabinet about 40% of the ministers are women. We have women MPs. Do you think the NRM regime has some credit to take back home in terms of affirmative action, in terms of empowering women, empowering youth? We know that now there's the National Youth Council. There are all these youth, structures. So do you think we have made progress as a country, post-independence, in terms of empowering women, disabled, the youth, and other groups of society?
I think that from the given of the fact that at some point, post-independence, there was the abolition of youth kind of movements and entities. And now, right now, we have a space where we have the National Youth Council.
National Women Council.
And we have the aspect of affirmative action coming in place, and those who had been disenfranchised and marginalized are coming on board. Yes, we have made some progress. Considering the fact that, we have a legislative policy that allows women to participate in election, and therefore dictates that in every district we should have a woman MP. That is great progress. The fact that we have slots in parliament for the disabled, I think that is great progress. But the real question that I would like us to tackle, even with this affirmative action, has it benefited? Has it benefited? Yes, that was the question that I was going to. Has it benefited the people on ground, the people who come to be at the end of the day are represented, these marginalized kinds of groups? I think that is where we have failed. We have not really, to a greater extent, benefited those people, because like for instance, if you're going to look at the disabled, so many disabled people are still not in the capacity of actually accessing jobs. You realize on a scale of 1 to 10, we have so very many few schools that actually cater for the disabled people. For instance, instance, school for the blind. We do not have schools, adequate schools that can actually cater for the blind. And that takes me back to my earlier argument that you see we are still not yet in that position where people as a whole, able or disabled, can actually, compete for jobs on the global space. Let's look at the women. I think that even with the presence of women MPs and representatives in parliament, we still have critical issues of gender-based violence, especially in relation to women. We still haven't tackled issues of rape. We still haven't tackled issues of defilement. We still haven't tackled issues of the fact that there is a girl out there in the village who misses school simply because she cannot afford pads or sanitary towels. So that is where, yes, even with the existence of the affirmative action, we are only having representatives who at the end of the day go and benefit themselves, and the real people on ground who get affected are not helped. So maybe going forward, there is a need for, I'm not asking us to scrap off the affirmative action, but I'm saying that there needs to be a new kind of mechanism and methodology to actually ensure that these people who are sent in parliament or in other, arms of government to actually represent the views and the plight of the marginalized, they should be held accountable to make sure that the marginalized are lifted up at the end of the day.
So are you saying that the women who are elected to these positions are not cognizant of the social issues at the grassroots level? Because perhaps we had imagined that because they are fellow women, then they understand the issues around gender-based violence, perhaps from their own experience or from the stories that they've gathered, and therefore they should have been in a better position to actually either legislate or advocate for better policies or for things, or to find remedy. So is this an indictment on the women leaders? Are they not doing enough?
Of course, that is basically what I'm trying to say, that they're not doing enough. For instance,
are there certain structural challenges that are actually curtailing and not allowing them to actually, do that? Because I've had people say that they hold positions, but then the power is not really there. I don't know. Do you also believe in that school of thought?
I do not believe in that school of thought. I believe that young, old, elected or non-elected, you can still have an impact. It's about your willingness. For instance, you talked of the fact that whether these, and you gave an example of women representatives, whether they're not aware of the things that actually affect the women on ground. Definitely they are aware. But then it comes all back to the question of willingness and effort. How much effort have they put on the grassroots to actually make sure that these women are helped? I was going to talk about the fact that Parliament gives us a space, or gives members of parliament space, right, to be able to place a private member's bill. Now, my question would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, how many times have we seen these women representatives coming on the floor of parliament and probably placing bills that, are in favor or in support of the marginalized woman out there? It's on very rare occasions that we see that. I think most times they come and then their focus is entirely driven aside into the political space. Yes, politics definitely has an impact on the social aspect, but then the question of willingness equally matters.
Wow, amazing. Osbert, just as we conclude, the issue of our debt burden. I don't know, it continues to rise. Our national budget is barely funded by taxpayers of Uganda. It's largely funded by donor funding. And I'll tell you something, that imagine the well-intended donation of, for example, mosquito nets that are intended to maybe curtail malaria that comes from maybe whatever country they're coming from. Imagine how much it puts the local producer of mosquito nets out of business. So let's just, as we conclude, let's just examine our debt burden, but also our economic policy as a country. We seem to be much more focused on attracting foreign investment at the expense of domestic players. They come with all these tax incentives, all these very good policies. But then the domestic entrepreneur, the domestic investor seems to be on their own. I mean, government doesn't seem to do so much to protect them. So do you think that our economic policy as a country, as we move towards celebrating 60 years, we need to sit down and say, guys, can we review our economic policy? Can we be more inward-looking than outward-looking? Can we see how to repay or how to refinance our debt burden so that, we can eventually streamline our economic journey after 60 years much more better? So just some of those economic issues.
I have been talking about production. If you don't have anything in the market, you are out.
Mm.
So as a country, we've been arguing it, even when we sit as yellow people, we discuss about it. Because if we are to defend the State House, the people of Uganda must be well off.
Yeah.
And we have discussed it heavily, whereby different models have been in place. Talk about partial development model. We talk about youth livelihood. Talk about women. They have been financed.
Yes.
And right now, what is taking place in our country, Uganda, many sites have been allocated as industrial hubs and as areas of people to go for skilling. But it's very unfortunate, the members of opposition, I don't know why I call them opposition members. I would like to call them advisors of the government, because nobody should oppose the government. They should advise the government on what should be done. So the members of the other side, they have been on the other side, oppose the government programs. When you talk about partial development model, whereby we had called statistics, to know at least every village, you should know how many households do you have, how much do they earn, what do they do. Then it will be easier for the government to help such people to come out from that deep numbers of poverty. And again, as Uganda, most Ugandans have been too lazy to work. Most members of our generation, they don't like to work almost day and night. They prefer to go to sleep in the churches. They prefer to go and sleep in the bars instead of taking place, instead of going to workplaces to work extra hard. So for us, since we're still young, we have a lot to do for our country.
Yeah.
I advise my colleagues, let us spend much of our time in production. Then, not only in production, but produce something valuable, which can be exported.
I agree with you. Because when you produce, then we can
have much of forex,
foreign exchange and things like that. And
then for the country, we have discussed with the government to make sure instead of prioritizing foreigners, let us invest in our own brothers and sisters in our country, Uganda. And my assurance to you, Uganda is a leading country in young entrepreneurs. It's only in Uganda, even if you have 10,000, you can start a business and you progress. But what has been missing in our societies is one, people had little or nothing almost about financial literacy. But many people have been moving in universities, in different societies to sensitize them about financial literacy.
And perhaps that is why one of the pillars of the parish development model is mindset change.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Now I want to end up with one statement. If we are to secure the independence of Uganda, we need a national mindset program for each and everybody, no matter where they come from, no matter the party they subscribe to, for us to have the smart goals for our country, Uganda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Joyce, let me come to you.
Yes.
We just concluded the East African Legislative Assembly elections, IALA. The FDC had a candidate, the Honorable Kaija. Do you feel betrayed that the National Unity Platform did not support your candidate? And is the opposition unity a hoax?
Well,
do you feel betrayed by any?
I do not necessarily feel betrayed. The challenge that we have is having a united voice as both as a country and as the opposition. And it is not something that starts today or that started with the National
So you're saying
Platform.
That even within you guys, there's not so much unity?
It hasn't been there, and it is because of the methods of methods of retention of power that the dictatorship employs.
But I think it's unfair.
Just a moment.
You want to even,
let me make.
You want to even blame your lack of unity.
Yes.
On the NRM.
Let me qualify. Let me qualify.
What stopped NUP from supporting your candidate?
Let me qualify my claim. In the past, I think 10 years, if UPC and DP have been having their candidates going to IALA, even when FDC was there, leading opposition party, okay? And the reason why that has been the case is because the two political parties had negotiated their own interests with the ruling party, which is the leading majority in the House. So during that time, the leader of opposition, then I think in 2012, that was Honorable Nandala Mafari, placed a motion saying it does not make sense to say political parties should all be represented in IALA, and yet it is NRM that is deciding. So if opposition is going to take members of parliament to to Iyala, then let opposition decide on the members they are taking, but not the NRM majority in the House selecting for them the opposition who should go there. In a nutshell, it becomes representatives of the NRM because they are the majority voters of those people.
No, that's
So,
not fair.
Just a moment.
If the NUP had voted for your candidate,
let me just qualify my statement, okay? So from that time on, the division has been there. And we ended up in a situation that we do not desire, but that we do not know how to get out of. In other words, we continued contesting for Iyala against the hope that we shall ever get elected there. So our contest for Iyala has not, for the last 10 years, has not been because we think we are going to win as FDC and go to the East African Legislative Assembly. It has simply been to have that platform to speak about the East African policy, the policies that we think would want the East African Legislative Assembly to re-echo. So that is how far we've been using it. So even if the National Unity Platform members had voted, he still wouldn't have made it, because when you look at the figures, unless the rigging was real, if
99 votes?
Yes.
How many MPs
the total number of people who voted was 495, I think, according.
Okay.
And out of 500.
Then let's add in the 57 votes.
Of the 99,
from NUP.
Of the 99, there was already members
160. Okay? Then get from other opposition parties. He could have defeated.
Kidega, the second last person amongst the people who lost had 213, is it 13 votes? 213 votes. That is the last person who lost out of the 9 that went there, okay? The last person had 213. So if you add, and you can't add 57, because if you add 57, you will go beyond the number of MPs in parliament.
But you see,
because already 495 voted, okay? Meaning the deficit of those who didn't vote out of 529 is just that.
NUPs voting for you would have given you a fighting chance, perhaps.
99 is still a fighting chance. What we need to understand as the opposition is the reason why we are in the struggle and what we are struggling against. Yeah, that is the only point that we need to understand, that we are struggling against unfairness. We are struggling against a greedy party that doesn't want to give room to other entities. So if we understand that, we shall understand that both the strategy that the National Unity Platform deployed and probably the one the FDC deploys are supposed to lead towards the same thing.
No, I think I think you're having double standards in your argument.
It is not double standards.
You're saying that you would have loved to have the Yala platform to legislate
the platform,
and to air out your views.
Even if he had one vote, and even if Kaija got one vote.
Getting that platform would have encompassed the National Unity Platform supporting you to get there.
Even if Kaija had one vote, okay? He still had a platform. He still stood on the floor of parliament and spoke about the things that he was supposed to say. But conclusively, to my brother here, I want to rely on his own statements, that the European Union and the Europeans, the colonialists, hate us. So if you love us, please show us the love. Love us more than they do. Demonstrate to us that you love us more than the Europeans do, and we shall come to your side. But if they come and show us more love than you're showing us, we shall not believe you. So go and tell your people.
Let us spread love.
Spread love. Spread the love.
Harris, yes, two things. As we move towards celebrating 60 years, the NUP has refused to join IPOD. You refused to negotiate with other political parties. You've refused to participate in the East African processes. Okay, does that mean that one, you lack a foreign policy, but also does it mean that you are intolerant and you don't want to listen to other divergent opinions? Are those two accusations right about the NUP? You have no foreign policy, that even if you got to Iyala, you have nothing to say, and two, you're intolerant, and that's why you don't even go to IPOD to negotiate with FDC, with UPC, or with NRM, or with whoever is there. So, as we celebrate 60 years, aren't you breeding bad politics for our country?
Well, No. I don't know even how to start because it's confusing, because I think that coming from her conversation, the dishonest again, and I don't know. I don't know how we're going to sort this, but let me make 3 points. Point number 1, regarding Iyala. We believe that the East African integration is a union about the East Africans and not the leaders. In other words, there must be shared values, principles, and norms that join us as the people of East Africa. And it is because of those values that we work so hard to make sure that we are one block. The benefits of doing that, like, bigger markets, strong political power. But for as long as at the software level, we are still different. Because when you look at Rwanda, it's a pure dictatorship. When you look at Uganda, it's a dictatorship. When you look at Kenya, they are towards almost a democracy. And in fact, the last election clearly brands them a democracy, at least to a larger extent, because they had a peaceful, free and fair election. When you look at Tanzania, they are the same. So maybe Tanzania should first unite with Kenya, and because at least in terms of organization, and if I'm to use the computer language at the software level, they are using the same operating environment. We have a completely different environment. So these different operating environments will speak different languages, and the program will clash.
But Harris.
So my point is,
the United States were actually different states.
My point is,
there are states that belonged to Mexicans, states that were black dominated,
and
states
they were annexed,
Asians,
and they were annexed,
and they came together
using force. But here we are talking about sovereign states. Using different systems of governance. I don't believe in integrating physically, saying, okay, let's amalgamate. We must first agree on certain important values. And one of those important values is democracy.
And where is the platform to agree on?
The platform to agree on is first internal. For as long as we cannot manage our internal affairs, it is foolhardy for us to claim that we are going to join a league of democrats. You only join, your ticket to join is democracy.
No, perhaps we could join and then be inspired.
How? We've been there.
Because if you're seeing someone who is doing
we've
better,
been there.
then perhaps...
So my brother, my point is, and this is how we view it, is that it's one thing to have the form. And my sister was talking about the Women National Council. That's a structure for participation. We have the National Youth Council. That's a structure for participation. We have, in Uganda, we have over 1 million positions that are elected. That means in terms of the form, it is there. But would you say that Ugandans genuinely participate in democracy? So Iyala is there. It has its own goals and intentions, but are there genuine institutional frameworks for proper participation? There is not. And the same applies to iPod. These are, to us, are structures of patronage. They are not genuinely aimed at engendering democracy. And for as long as...
Is that an indictment on the FDC that is a...
What my sister was saying, and I think, I don't know whether you deliberately, but I don't think it was deliberate. I think you misunderstood her genuinely, is that Mr. Keija went there not thinking that he would win. He has been going there. He did not go there to win. He went there to use that parliamentary platform offered him by virtue of his candidature to speak about the ill design of electing members of Iyala. Speaking to the greater East African Parliament, but not because he believed that he was going to go to Iyala. But that's what my sister was saying.
There are other MPs who could have done that. The FDC has MPs in the House who could have spoken they have this position
At
on those
this
matters.
moment,
But
the,
they
the,
wouldn't
at
be
this moment,
candidates.
the matter on table was Iyala.
Yes.
You get so
Alright.
every
Yes.
attention was
Okay, and then
around
iPod, your lack of tolerance.
No, it's not about iPod, because iPod is clearly an organization for bullying each other. I mean, Mr. Museveni coming to lecture his colleague without respect. iPod should be an agenda-based platform for, for engendering democracy in Uganda. But where you have an election such as we've had, as violent, it's the most violent election we have had, and there is no statement from iPod, then why join them? So, and I think for the same reason we have been, talking about, I think that even the National Democratic Institute, is it the Netherlands, the sponsors of they are withdrawing, because they say, well, whereas we had thought this, but this is not a genuine endeavor. This is there is no goodwill. You see,
but even the youth formed their own sort of association, and still no youth refused to join them.
Because you see,
that was engineered, I think, even by FDC. I am not sure.
Yeah.
And Noop youth said, we won't join you guys in this coalition.
Yeah, but just like UNSA, just like the National Youth Council, these are not genuine structures for speaking about the issues that affect the real Ugandan. These are structures for
our time is fast spent, colleagues. Osbert, I will give you 2 minutes, but the rest of us, I'll give you a much more less time, because I think he has issues to respond to. So just your final words on the show, and perhaps just hold up as you conclude. Just tell us what a 61-year-old Uganda, 61 moving forward, should envisage and look at. So Osbert, you have 2 minutes to conclude. Then the rest of us will be strictly 30 seconds.
Yeah, what I wanted to tell my brother and my sister from opposition, East African Parliament, it is members to participate, it's a delegation. If you say it is for East Africans, you cannot expect each and everybody in East Africa to participate in that election. You get it right? You get it right. So I think Noop should revise it and should be focused on that side. Because you have delegations, members who must participate that side. That's an issue which I wanted to bring across. Then for Uganda at 60, I will continue to insist on my words. As a country, to defend our independence, everybody must be engaged fully in the production. Whatever we do, we must participate in production. The issue of corruption in Uganda, it's not all about President Museveni. Almost every Ugandan right now is a corrupt person. This is a speaker of the entire of a division in the central Uganda. If in the capital city. In the capital city. Yes. I want you to challenge us. If you have not been financed, members in Uganda, they receive, the moment they receive budgets, instead of doing a service delivery, they make a vis-a-vis of the service delivery. And let alone, they can't be in chambers. What I want to bring on the table
so
is
you're saying that even Harris in his
work, they are not patriotic. They don't want to see Uganda progress.
Corruption.
That's what you are thinking.
No, what do you call facilitation?
For your information,
no, you're saying it's facilitation to do his work.
For your information, the decision speakers don't run any vote. So they have no budget to spend. Secondly,
but you have council members. Educate them, guide them on how the country should run.
But
that's
they spend the budget. They don't have the budget.
Guide
to vote.
Members of the council. Then
but they get subvention.
No, they don't.
No.
So how do you
the responsibility, Mr. Moderator, the responsibility of speakers, wherever they are, it's to guide, to make sure the executive is accountable. So make sure take part if you love Uganda and Africa.
They shoot them.
Okay.
Please do that. Then another thing which I want to talk about, please. My last statement is
30 seconds.
As a country, let us look at national salvation with immediate effect. If you look at national salvation, we are going to defend Uganda, and the vision of 2040 in our country, Uganda, is going to be defended. So at this time, I call upon each and everybody in Uganda, young, old, policemen, civilians, lame, and all capable leaders and non-capable leaders. Let us reason, then we defend the national salvation in our country, Uganda. Then we shall be able to say Uganda is independent. But currently, whereby people are seeking for guidance from Europe, Uganda is not yet independent, according to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Joyce, perhaps
Yes.
he has said capable and incapable leaders. I don't know where you fall. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and I think he has
your last words.
he has concluded with a problem, which is incapable leaders, incapable leadership, and he has also talked about national salvation. For me, what I can conclude with here is that we are not going to develop this country through sloganeering. Okay, we've had even parties called, formations called national. There was National Salvation Army. There is now the National Unity Platform. There is Forum for Democratic Change.
Yesterday we had a new political party,
Uganda
Need.
Need.
Yes.
So all these namings is to reflect what we ideally want, but in action and purpose we are not doing what we need to do to get there. As a country, we need to be united. But for us to be united, we must treat each other well, because you're not going to expect us to be under your national salvation when we are not part of it. In practice, we are not amongst the beneficiaries. So for us to move as one country against the external forces that want to divide us or steal our resources, we have to first resolve our internal issues. Production is what we need, but are we creating an environment for production? We have the PDM. What is PDM addressing? Is it addressing the core issues of production? You're giving people money. Is money the core issue against production, or actually the environment, which is drought? We've had 2 years without a season in Uganda, and that's why we have hunger all over the country. So instead of addressing the infrastructural problems and the environment, we address the leaves. We don't address the root cause of these issues. And that is what your government and the regime that and anyone else who wants to take this country forward has to look
you're
at.
a member of government.
That is what we have to look at and address,
You're a member of
and creating an enabling environment for local investors.
Yeah.
Recently, when NEMA was moving to chase people away from wetlands, the Minister of Finance and several government officials boldly said that the foreign investors are free to operate in wetlands, but they were slashing gardens of local investors without any compensation.
As you conclude.
Yes, so it is not fair when you treat us like that. You love foreigners more than you love us, but when it is our turn to love foreigners, you start telling us that they hate us. Let us be honest with each other and do everything very realistically. That is my conclusion.
Yes, Speaker, Uganda at 60.
Thank you very much. It shall be remembered that on the 9th day of October of the Rhodes year of 1962, this Ugandan country was crowned independent of the British rule. Materially, no, this Sunday, I think it will be the 9th day of October 2022, it will mark 60 years of the quote-unquote independence. Of course, there is a lot of debate on what entails that independence, whether it be economic independence, political independence. But I want to leave our viewers and Ugandans, especially the young, whether you're in NUP, opposition, whether you're in the government, I want to leave them with the words of Honorable Kawalia Kawanga at the time, when he said that our 3 evils that we have to grapple with as a society is poverty, is ignorance, and is disease. These 3 evils don't know our party colors. They affect us all. These are real issues. 19 women dying every day while giving birth, which we could have prevented. Our record in terms of human rights, many thousands, young people being held incommunicado for no clear charges, and others over 50, missing for over 2 years. These, for me, ladies and gentlemen, are not partisan matters. And so as I don't know, one side I think will be celebrating, another will be commemorating or reflecting on the 60 years. the question is, what are our national values? Are there things as a generation, because this is a point of departure. I saw the son to the Mr. President saying that about 40 years, this guy in 2026, these guys will be in power for 40 years, the old. This is now a point of departure. But now that at that point of juncture, what we need to separate are certain values. The certain values from our old bad values, most of them are bad values, that we need to unlearn and be inspired by new values. And these values that are important for national building, for state building, he calls it national salvation and non-partisan. These are non-negotiables. They are standards that we all must aspire to when we call ourselves Ugandans. Shall we reach that today? Because I know the celebrations are going to be at Kororo on Sunday, but it is going to be a partisan celebration. I think going ahead, looking forward to the Uganda we want, I think when we eventually have change of government, we should have celebrations that are actually national in character, not celebrations that are partisan, because they demobilize us. Development is about mobilizing all the people towards a certain idea. And that's why at the beginning, I did invite, and I know these conversations are continuous. So again, invite you colleagues that when we are involved in national debates like this, let's come with honesty and with eagerness to learn and share honestly where we fall short, because to be human is to err. We are not perfect. We are building or making we're making a contribution to the future. Our time will come and we'll pass on this mantle to the next generation. I thank you so much, Civic Space, for always creating this platform to share with the rest of Ugandans, and to those who will be celebrating, I say Happy Independence Day.
Okay, thank you, Juliet.
I'll withdraw my parting shots from what he just said. I always tell people I am not a politician and I wouldn't really want to venture into the political space. So rather, I prefer to look at the social aspects. And I'll just make this clear. When he talks about the fact that we need to have our national values clear, and we need to make known that those national values shouldn't be partisan, they shouldn't know political colors, he is 100% right. So I think going forward, Uganda at 60 is still struggling with realization of its national values, and above all with unity, which Adikini has been emphasizing time and again. So we need to unite. We need to have consensus on what our national values are. And there is no need for us to go about, throwing tantrums and fist fights in parliament, especially when it comes to issues that affect the core man out there. And when I talk of those issues, I'm talking about diseases, which he mentioned. I'm talking about education. I'm talking about the need for us to elevate the poor man. He talked about production. I'm talking about the need for us to actually avail the suitable environment for production, you realize. Yes, and I'm talking about the need for us to find better methodologies of eradicating corruption such that we can achieve a better Uganda economically, socially, and above all, when it comes to politically, we need to have that aspect of honesty, because we cannot proceed if we lack honesty amongst ourselves. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Wow, it has been an amazing couple of hours and minutes. But we thank you for keeping it with us. Thank you very much, comrades, for joining us on the Youth Roundtable. Comrade Osbert, Comrade Lake, Comrade Joyce, and Comrade Harris, many thanks for sparing the time to be on the Youth Roundtable. Of course, to the production team, many thanks for ensuring that our show is aired right on time. Well, my last words as a host is just to the young people. Nature bores a vacuum, and we must occupy these spaces that seem to be vacant. It could be in the political sense, in the social, but also in the economic. Let's occupy these spaces because the future belongs to us. We are the Joshuas of our time. Well, that is it from us. Have a lovely independence celebration. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.